Hey, and welcome again to Explore Your Roots. This episode is going to spotlight an ancestor of mine by the name of Hans Peter Michael Ipsen. He is a relative from my mom's side of the family, and I might add that he has one of the most amazing beards, so tune in to review his life and accomplishments. Okay, so the investigation for this episode was done through genealogy websites and through the study of some genealogical records, as well as some books that my mom has mailed me. So, to begin, Hans Peter Michael Ipsen is my third great-grandfather, and my relationship to him goes like this. It starts with me, then goes to my mom, then her mom, my grandma Joan, and then her mother, Ava Mary Ipsen, then her father, Michael Peter Ipsen, then his father is the topic of this episode, Hans Peter Michael Ipsen. Hans Peter Michael Ipsen was born on November 23rd, 1843 in, I might be pronouncing this wrong, but Akerkeby, Denmark. He was the last of four children, one of which was adopted, born to Anders Peter Ipsen and Karen Malin Michael's daughter. So the city of Akerkeby is located on a Danish island called Bornholm in the Baltic Sea about 70 miles east of Denmark. The people on this island, including the Ipsen family, were very self-sufficient. Anders, Hans's father, was a coal miner at the time working in the nearby town of Sorthat. The coal was surface mined in that area, but in March of 1843, when Hans was only 3 years old, Anders, his father, suffered an accident resulting in his death. It is unknown exactly what happened, but his death certificate states that an unlucky thing happened on the way home. Hans' newly widowed mother, Karen, then knitted and spun every day to provide for her and her four young children. When Hans was around 9 years old, he decided that he needed to pull his own weight and began to work. So his first job was herding sheep. Then a year later he began to herd cattle. Then a year after that he went and helped his uncle working on the farm. Around 1859, when Hans was 16 years old, he worked as an apprentice to a carpenter. At this time, Hans describes himself as being sort of clumsy, and so his employers turned him away, where he then went back to work on a farm. After some time and probably a bit of maturing and even practice, Hans returned to try his hand at carpentry, where he was able to be successful. In the 1860 Denmark census, he is listed as boarding in a household of a Jorgen Peter Moller along with 5 other workers. In the late 1860s, Hans began to have the desire to emigrate to the United States, and on June 19, 1871, he left the island of Bornholm for the United States, being 27 years old. Shortly after arriving in the United States, Hans continued on to Ogden, Utah, arriving there on July 21st of that same year. After stepping out of the depot in Ogden, Utah on a Friday afternoon in July, Hans asked a man nearby for directions to any site nearby where building was going on. He was directed to a construction manager nearby named N.C. Flager, who gave him work helping build a home. After the home, Hans went to helping build the ZCMI granaries. He lived and boarded probably with other migrants or carpenters with whom he worked with. Hans writes that they all spoke English, and so he learned English pretty fast after arriving in the U.S. Hans was a very sociable person who loved to dance and go to parties. One day in 1872, he was out with some friends when they decided to go and visit a sick young woman named Emma Frederick Nystrom, who had just emigrated from Sweden only 4 weeks earlier. Upon entering the room, and even though Hans had never met Emma, they both became enamored at first sight. He told his friends, "If I can get that girl, she's mine." They dated for only 6 weeks and then got married on September 23rd, 1872 in Salt Lake City. Together, Hans and Emma had 8 children, 5 of which lived to adulthood. Hilda, the first child, was born in 1873. Michael, of whom I come through, was next in 1875. Carl Victor was next, born in 1877 but died shortly after, and Joseph, born in 1880, also died shortly after. Emma was next, born in 1883. Then David was born in 1886 and died that same year. Then Ellen was born in 1888, and the last child, Elizabeth, was born in 1889. Hans and Emma made sure to create a loving home and an atmosphere of learning and culture. All of the daughters in the home would paint and play music. Michael, the only son, was more of an outdoorsy person, and as he grew older, he learned carpentry from his father, Hans. Hans and his family continued living in Ogden, Utah, with the exception of a couple years spent in Wilson, Utah, which is only a few miles away from Ogden. Hans was a very charitable person and spent a lot of his time and money helping build local churches and even paid many of the workers with his own money. The 1900 census has Hans listed as being a carpenter, but the 1910 census has him listed as retired, so it was sometime between those dates that he most likely retired from his daily job. On January 9th, 1916, when Hans Peter Michael Ipsen was 72 years old, he passed away, and the cause of death listed on his death certificate is valvular heart disease and enlargement with failure. The newspaper of the Salt Lake Telegram obituary remembered Hans as being a veteran contractor. His family and friends remember him as being an honest, charitable, and fun-loving father and friend, and I remember him through their memories and stories. I think there is so much to learn from Hans' life. I love the story of him learning his profession of carpentry and actually not being very good and even being rejected when he first started. But after much time and practice, he eventually got it down and became a professional, where even in death he was remembered for his skill and craftsmanship. I love the stories of his fun-loving nature, of being very sociable and enjoying spending time with friends and family. I also love the fact that he donated much of his money and time to helping and serving others in his community. Hopefully we can all learn something from Hans' example in life. So, learn something about your own ancestors and share them with your friends and family. And if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and give this episode a thumbs up.